These climbing shoes were made in 1978 and they've never been worn, which means, of course, they've never been climbed in. Until today.
Ooh, that is slippery. I feel like I could stand here forever. Although, these magic dyno shoes?
When these shoes were made, Donkey Kong was still 4 years away from hitting the arcades. Elvis Presley had just died and Star Wars was less than a year old. The world was basically still black and white when these shoes were made. Things sure have changed since then, but when it comes to rock climbing shoes, how much really has changed? These shoes were made in 1978 and have never been used. So today I'm taking these to the local climbing gym and I'm going to experience how climbing might have been nearly 45 years ago. Except I'll be indoors, which wasn't a thing until the first indoor climbing gym was opened in the late 1980s. These shoes were never meant to touch those holds. But I'm going to do it anyway. And along the way, I'm going to compare how climbing in these 45-year-old climbing shoes compares to climbing in modern climbing shoes. It's riveting content. Because I think these things are called rivets. Or they're called grommets. They might be called grommets. This is grommeting content. They're heavy. Like, they're not heavy like boots, but they're definitely heavier than climbing shoes would normally be. All right, let's get the second one on and start climbing. As soon as I jumped off of that foothold, I remembered what shoes I was wearing, and I realized I probably shouldn't have trusted my foot the way that I did. Ooh, that is slippery. This is really, really slippery. Okay, but these edges, they have really good edges actually. Surprisingly good edges. I was not expecting that. I don't want to trust the toes though, so I can pivot up here. Well, falling wasn't so bad. There's no harsh angle on the toe, and the fit is actually probably a smidge too big, so falling was okay. Ooh! Something I wasn't expecting. My smear on the left did not go well. Oh man. Oh no. No. That problem stressed out these shoes. And now I've got to be able to stick that left so I can bring my right up. I don't trust it. I've climbed this problem many times, sometimes with extra weight on, so I know I can do it very well. But I was legitimately scared with my left foot here, right hand up on under that undercling, to leap up to that hold up there to get a, what was it? I think it would be a right foot up here. That was legitimately scary. Okay, now for the ultimate test. Will these shoes
for reasons beyond science, allow me to do this dyno more consistently. I've done this step-up dyno twice in my entire life. It's never consistent because I've tried it, I don't know, 1,000 times. Will these make it easier? My guess is definitely not. These shoes are from 1978. Let's take a look at what the rubber's looking like after a few climbs, shall we? Unlace 1,000 laces. It's a good thing that these shoes are pretty comfortable, all things considered, because these are not a shoe that you could just take off after every few climbs like you might have to with more aggressive, tighter, modern shoes. So the rubber's chalky, as we expected. It's wearing not really anything noticeable yet, obviously, hopefully not anyway. But in terms of feel, you can still hear kind of a bit of a rubberiness, I guess you could say. But yeah, they're still, I mean, they feel surprisingly rubbery still. They remind me a lot of, I have some tarantula laces, which were my first climbing shoe that I had purchased. And I still, every once in a while, will return to them to sort of remind myself how I used to get along. And these remind me a lot of that, not only because it's the single piece of rubber at the bottom, but just the feel of the rubber itself actually kind of reminds me of those a little bit. And those served me well for many months. So I can imagine these probably doing the same for somebody. I started bouldering 1 year ago in February 2023, and I fell in love hard. Bouldering basically became my personality, and so I developed an intense interest in it, like I do with all of my obsessions. I learned about every move, every hold type, famous climbers, and especially I learned about the gear, because I believe gear tells a story. The disparity between original gear and modern gear and the time it takes to arrive at the latter can give us a clue about how receptive the general public is to an activity, which hints at the degree of hostility it may have suffered during that time. As an example of what I'm talking about, take this original NES controller released in 1986 compared to this modern Nintendo controller. Over 38 years, the design of the controller has changed dramatically, from a harshly angled box to an ergonomic work of art. Though I do have an affinity for this controller, to be fair, it's quite nice. Such a dramatic change over such a relatively short amount of time means that popular reception must have been quick. The world must have taken to video games pretty quickly for there to be so many people who want to innovate and are driven to innovate for probably financial gain. Now compare that to the climbing shoe from 1930, which I don't have, but there's a picture of it on screen. This is when the first climbing shoe was manufactured, and now look at the one in 1978, which is when these shoes were manufactured. Not much has changed. With so little change in 40 years, one can assume that rock climbing had quite an uphill battle to make its way into the living room, so to speak. Now thankfully, since 1940, a lot has changed with climbing shoes. Or maybe not, thankfully. I don't know, maybe this Pierre Alain design got it right 45 years ago, and these modern shoes are garbage. Let's compare. My first thought was I expected them to be uncomfortable, just because of the amount of rubber on them, the fact that they're canvas shoes, and I personally am not used to canvas shoes, but I actually find them pretty comfortable. It makes me understand now why so many people love canvas like shoes, like Converse type shoes. This is essentially the look of that. And they were surprisingly comfortable. So one thing I was not expecting, though I probably should have expected, is the amount of lacing on these things makes it very, very difficult to take off between problems, which is something modern bouldering, especially with downsized shoes, like a lot of people like to do. Not me, but a lot of people like to have very, very small shoes. You want to take them off between sessions or between climbs. It would be very hard to do that with these shoes, or at least cumbersome, not hard, just tedious. So I wasn't expecting that, but again, given how comfortable they are, I don't think anyone would need to take them off all the time. Also, considering the time that they were created, back in 1978, indoor bouldering wasn't a thing, and outdoor bouldering, maybe you just didn't need or didn't think about having tighter shoes. In fact, aggressive shoes didn't really exist, and aggressive shoes, to my understanding, are what sort of prompted people to want to get smaller and smaller shoes, so that their toes can really dig down into the toe boot, or the toe, boot I think it's called, so that they can, claw their way up rocks a little bit better. So you wouldn't really need that or consider that, I guess, back in the 70s. So having tight shoes that you needed to take off between climbs wasn't a thing. I was expecting the rubber to be much, much more slippery than it really is. And though it did turn out that the rubber was quite slippery, it wasn't as slippery as I thought it was going to be. In fact, it felt very similar to La Sportiva Tarantula laces, a shoe that I have a lot of familiarity with. However, the hardness of the rubber is something I was conscious of, but not expecting how big of an issue it would play. This rubber is so hard, and it could be a figment of it being an older shoe. Maybe when they first came out, back in 1978, the rubber would have been a little softer, and it's just maybe aged over time, possibly aged in a way that made it harder over time. That's possible. The hardness of the rubber prevented a lot for me, and in fact helped me know a little bit more and helped me understand a little bit more even about why modern shoes have different hardnesses of the leather, hardnesses of the rubber, and what that means. I've always read about different hardnesses and how certain rubbers are harder than others, and I've never really grasped why that's important. These shoes opened my eyes to that and helped me understand that. The hardness of the rubber made it very difficult to do things like smear on the walls, for sure. That was very difficult. I slipped so many times. It made it difficult to do any sort of move that involved traction, pushing in sort of a perpendicular to completely, or a parallel kind of way, if that makes sense. So rather than jumping straight up off the shoe or off the foot, it made it very difficult to jump at angles. The hardness of the leather, however, did allow me to take my time on small foot chips. I could practically live on a foot chip with rubber this hard. So there's positives and minuses. Overall, I did not like the hard rubber. I will definitely be sticking with softer rubber shoes for sure, even if it does mean I have to pain my way through some smaller foot chips sometimes. And lastly, the angle for the edging was incredibly nice. When you look at it visually, it is a very harsh angle on the rubber, or on the edge here. A lot of modern shoes will have more of a curved angle, but this being a one piece of rubber ply, it's basically glued to the bottom of the shoe. It means that there's a very harsh edge right now. There's a few modern shoes I know. Black Diamond has a pair of shoes that are very similar to this. So right now, these being brand new shoes, this edge was amazing. Again, I could live on foot chips on my edge, not just on the toe, but on the edge as well. But this rubber also, I would imagine, would grind away to something a little bit more rounded over time, meaning that the edging capabilities probably will go down over time, in the same way that even a modern shoe would. So that's not necessarily a knock on this versus a modern shoe, but it is something that will inevitably happen, so I can't give it too much credit for its edging ability, knowing that this will wear down over time.
I had a ton of fun making this video. I had a ton of fun digging into a bit of the history with bouldering. I had a ton of fun digging into the gear with bouldering, the shoe specifically. I feel really kind of special and privileged to be able to wear these shoes for the very first time since they were originally manufactured, and doing some climbing in them. I don't know, I felt like I was part of something kind of special, to be totally honest. That may sound weird, I know, but that's, I guess, what happens when you tap into a piece of history for something you love so much, in a way that really you aren't allowed to do very often. You aren't able to do very often. Wearing these felt, spiritual is the stupid word, but I will say it because I think it's as close as I can get to the concept of how it felt to wear these shoes. I did feel like I was literally stepping into history, so to speak. I guess literally maybe I was, if you consider these history, which I guess they are. I was literally stepping into history. If you got to the end of this video, chances are you love bouldering as much as I do. You must be a super nerd about it. Thank you for sticking around. Please give this video a like, subscribe to this channel if you would, and please check out some more of my bouldering content. Again, if you like this video and you're a nerd about bouldering, then you will probably like a lot of my other bouldering content as well. You can find those videos here on the side. Click any one of them. Either one will send you somewhere delightful, I hope.